Some years take more than others. In 2026, the world said goodbye to warriors, artists, icons, and voices that had shaped entire generations. People whose work was so woven into the fabric of daily life that their absence felt like something had shifted in the air itself. Some of their deaths came after long battles fought in full public view. Others arrived without warning. All of them left behind something that cannot be replaced. These are 10 legendary celebrities who died in 2026 and will be missed forever. Number 10, Neil Sedaka, the Brooklyn boy who wrote forever. Neil Sedaka had one of the most improbable second acts in music history. Born on March 13, 1939, in the Brighton Beach neighborhood of Brooklyn, he grew up across the street from Neil Diamond and down the block from Carole King. Something was in the air on those streets. His mother worked a part-time job at a department store for 6 months just to pay for a second-hand piano when a teacher noticed his talent in second grade. By age 13, he was writing songs with a 16-year-old neighbor named Howard Greenfield, a partnership that would produce hundreds of songs and define an era. His mother had wanted him to become a classical pianist. What she got instead was one of the architects of the Brill Building sound, a factory of songwriting talent operating out of Manhattan in the late 1950s and early 1960s that would rewrite American pop music. Sedaka's run of hit singles between 1959 and 1962 was extraordinary. Oh Carol in 1959, Calendar Girl in 1960, Happy Birthday Sweet 16 in 1961, and Breaking Up Is Hard to Do in 1962. One of the best-known pop singles of the decade. He also wrote for others, Stupid Cupid for Connie Francis, Love Will Keep Us Together for Captain and Tennille. Over the course of his career, Sedaka wrote or co-wrote more than 500 songs. When the Beatles arrived and fundamentally shifted the direction of American pop in the mid-1960s, Sedaka's commercial success faded. He spent years as a respected but less prominent figure in the industry. Then came his remarkable comeback in the 1970s. 3 British albums he recorded in the early part of the decade caught the attention of Elton John, who signed him to his Rocket Records label. The result was a second wave of chart success, including Laughter in the Rain and Bad Blood, both of which reached #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 in 1975. He became one of the few artists to score major hits in both the 1950s to 60s era and the 1970s. He was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1983. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1978. He continued performing and touring well into his 80s, releasing new recordings and appearing in concerts for audiences who had grown up with his music and never stopped loving it. On the morning of February 27, 2026, Sedaka was hospitalized in Los Angeles after experiencing a medical emergency. He had dined at a local restaurant 2 days earlier with no visible signs of illness. He died later that same day at the age of 86. His death certificate listed atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease as the cause, with kidney failure as a contributing factor. His family described his passing as sudden and said they were devastated. The music industry and the millions who had been singing his melodies for 60 years mourned accordingly. His songs had outlived the trends that surrounded them. They will outlive the century. But as profound as the loss of Neil Sedaka was to the music world, the next person on this list represented something beyond music, a career of startling depth across 7 decades of film that few actors have ever matched. Number 9, Robert Duvall, the American Olivier. Robert Selden Duvall was born on January 5, 1931, in San Diego, California, the son of a rear admiral in the United States Navy. He grew up in Navy towns, Annapolis, Maryland, and the San Diego area, absorbing the rhythms and speech of different American regions, an education in human variety that would serve him for the rest of his career. After graduating from Principia College in Illinois and serving in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, he moved to New York and enrolled in the neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater to study under the legendary acting coach Sanford Meisner. His classmates included Gene Hackman and James Caan. He worked odd jobs, sorting mail, clerking at Macy's, driving a truck, while sharing an apartment with Dustin Hoffman. What followed was one of the most sustained and varied careers in the history of American cinema. He made his film debut in a small role as the reclusive Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962. A decade later, he played Tom Hagen in The Godfather and its 1974 sequel, earning his first Academy Award nomination for a role that required him to be the still center of a film full of explosive performances. He followed that with Apocalypse Now in 1979, where he played Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore in a performance so committed it entered the permanent vocabulary of American film culture. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor for Tender Mercies in 1983, in which he played an over-the-hill country music singer and did his own singing. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Judge in 2014 at age 83. 7 Academy Award nominations over a career that spanned more than 60 years, 2 Emmy Awards, 4 Golden Globes, a National Medal of Arts in 2005. Film critics had long called him the American Olivier, a comparison to the legendary British actor Laurence Olivier, and the label stuck. On February 15, 2026, Robert Duvall passed away peacefully at his farm in Middleburg, Virginia. He was 95. His wife, Luciana Pedraza Duvall, announced his death the following day. No official cause of death was disclosed. His family indicated he had passed peacefully at home. Just 10 weeks earlier, in December 2025, he had posted a video of himself doing bicep curls with a dumbbell at age 94, captioning it with a note that he preferred tennis, swimming, and horseback riding to the gym, but still enjoyed the routine. Al Pacino, who had stood beside him in The Godfather half a century earlier, called him a born actor whose phenomenal gift would always be remembered. The next legend to leave us in 2026 gave America something just as enduring, but on a very different stage and in a very different fight. Number 8, Jesse Jackson, the voice that would not be silenced. Jesse Louis Jackson was born on October 8, 1941, in Greenville, South Carolina. His mother was 16 years old and unmarried at his birth. He grew up in circumstances that would have defeated many people, but by the time he was in college at the Agricultural and Technical College of North Carolina, where he graduated with a degree in sociology in 1964, he had already become a student leader, a football player, and an activist organizing sit-ins at segregated libraries, theaters, and restaurants. He left graduate studies at the Chicago Theological Seminary to join the Southern Christian Leadership Conference under Martin Luther King Jr. King gave him his first significant role, heading Operation Breadbasket in Chicago, the economic arm of the SCLC, dedicated to improving conditions in Black communities through targeted economic pressure on companies that discriminated. Jackson was 24. By 1967, he was the national director. When King was killed on April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Jesse Jackson was among those present. The photograph of him at the Lorraine Motel balcony the day before the assassination, standing with King alongside Hosea Williams and Ralph Abernathy, is one of the defining images of the civil rights movement. Jackson went on to found Operation Push in 1971 and later the Rainbow/Push Coalition, organizations that continued his work to increase Black Americans' political and economic power. He ran for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1984 and again in 1988. His 1988 campaign was remarkable. He finished second in the Democratic primary, won more than 6.5 million votes, and delivered what became known as the Keep Hope Alive speech at the Democratic National Convention. He had registered more than 1 million new voters. He later negotiated the release of hostages and prisoners in international crises that diplomats had been unable to resolve, and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Clinton in 2000. In 2017, Jackson publicly disclosed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He called it a physical challenge and refused to let it end his advocacy. Years later, he was diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, a degenerative neurological condition. His family had him hospitalized in November 2025 for observation. On February 17, 2026, Jesse Jackson died peacefully at home in Chicago, surrounded by his family. He was 84. His death came 3 days after his friend and fellow giant Robert Duvall had passed. The civil rights movement had lost its last great voice of the generation that walked with King. Next on this list is a figure who shaped not the political landscape, but the physical one. A man whose image had become so synonymous with strength that the internet invented an entire mythology around him. Number 7. Chuck Norris, the man who outlived the myth. Carlos Ray Norris was born on March 10, 1940, in Ryan, Oklahoma, the oldest of 3 brothers. His father was an alcoholic who eventually abandoned the family. His childhood was, by his own description, downbeat. He was non-athletic, shy, and scholastically unremarkable. He said that he had no real skill growing up, and that no one would have identified him as someone destined for anything remarkable. In 1958, he enlisted in the United States Air Force as an air policeman and was stationed at Osan Air Base in South Korea. It was there, during that posting, that he received the nickname Chuck and began training in Tang-Soo-Do. He discovered that he was, in fact, athletic, exceptionally so. He had simply never found the right discipline. After his discharge in 1962, he opened a chain of martial arts schools in California. Among his celebrity clients were Steve McQueen, Bob Barker, and Priscilla Presley. It was McQueen who told him he should take acting seriously. He made his screen debut in a small, uncredited role in 1969, then fought Bruce Lee in the 1972 Hong Kong martial arts film The Way of the Dragon. From there, his career as America's first homegrown martial arts movie star was cemented. Through the 1980s, he appeared in a series of hard-edged action films: Missing in Action, Code of Silence, The Delta Force, Invasion USA, that established him as the genre's defining icon on American soil. In 1993, he took the role that brought him into millions of American living rooms: Cordwalker and Walker, Texas Ranger. The show ran for 9 seasons and spawned both a television movie and a reboot. For an entire generation of American children and teenagers, Walker was simply what a hero looked like. In the 2000s, something unexpected happened. Chuck Norris became the subject of a massive wave of internet humor. Chuck Norris facts, ironic one-liners about his supposed superhuman toughness, circulated across every platform. He counted them in the thousands and found them genuinely amusing, even contributing to charity compilations of his favorites. He was, by every account, in extraordinary health for his age. On March 10, 2026, his 86th birthday, he posted a video of himself sparring with a personal trainer. Less than 10 days later, on March 19, 2026, he was hospitalized in Kauai, Hawaii, following a sudden medical emergency. He died later that morning. His family announced his passing the following day, describing it as sudden and choosing to keep the specific circumstances private. They wrote that to the world he had been a martial artist, actor, and symbol of strength. But to them, he had been a devoted husband, loving father and grandfather, and the heart of their family. Tributes poured in from world leaders, fellow action stars, and the internet communities that had spent 2 decades celebrating him, in their particular way, as indestructible. The man who had outlived every joke about his invincibility was gone at 86, just days after posting that he didn't age. He leveled up. The next person on this list was not an action hero in front of the camera. He was something rarer, the person behind the camera who made the heroes possible. Number 6. Clive Davis, the man with the golden ears. Clive J. Davis was born on April 4, 1932, in the Crown Heights neighborhood of Brooklyn. His father was an electrician. Both his parents died while he was still a freshman at New York University, complications from high blood pressure, leaving him, in his own words, a destitute undergraduate forced to move in with his sister to finish his degree. He earned that degree magna cum laude. He then earned a scholarship to Harvard Law School and graduated in 1956. He entered music through the side door. After 2 years at a Midtown Manhattan law firm, he was hired as an assistant counsel at Columbia Records, then owned by CBS. Within a few years, he was promoted, and by 1967, he was named president of Columbia Records. He was 34. He knew almost nothing about music production or recording. He knew about contracts, about business, and about listening. What followed was one of the most consequential half-centuries in the history of the recorded music industry. At Columbia, Davis recognized the commercial potential of rock music at a moment when the label was still focused on traditional pop, jazz, and classical. He signed Janis Joplin, Carlos Santana, Sly and the Family Stone, and a young artist from New Jersey named Bruce Springsteen, who later wrote publicly that Davis had changed his life when he signed him at 22 years old, and that Davis had treated him with the same respect as a nobody as he did after all his success. In 1973, Davis was abruptly fired from Columbia following allegations of misuse of company funds, charges he denied. He pleaded guilty to a single count of tax evasion in 1975 and paid a $10,000 fine. The experience would have ended most careers. Davis used it as a reset. In 1974, he founded Arista Records, where he would build perhaps the second defining chapter of his career. At Arista, he signed Barry Manilow, gave Aretha Franklin a commercial second wind, and, most famously, spotted a 19-year-old gospel-trained singer performing in a New York nightclub with her mother and signed her to the label. That singer was Whitney Houston. Under Davis's guidance, and with his insistence on specific artistic choices, Houston became one of the best-selling recording artists in history. He also helped guide the careers of Patti Smith, Rod Stewart, Kenny G, Alicia Keys, and later contributed to the development of hip-hop by supporting Sean Combs in establishing Bad Boy Records, which became home to the notorious B.I.G. He won 4 Grammy Awards for his own work, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a non-performer in 2000, and founded the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at New York University in 2003. In 2013, at the age of 80, Davis published his autobiography, The Soundtrack of My Life, in which he publicly came out as bisexual, a disclosure he hoped would contribute to greater understanding. He continued attending and hosting events in the music industry into his 90s. His annual pre-Grammy Gala, which he had hosted for decades, was an institution, drawing the biggest names in music every February. On June 22, 2026, Clive Davis died at his home in Manhattan at the age of 94. He had been hospitalized with respiratory problems in the days before his death. His family's statement described him as a man whose vision, instincts, and relentless pursuit of excellence had shaped the soundtrack of countless lives. Coming next is someone who shaped a different kind of soundtrack. An actor whose face was as familiar to audiences as a family member's, and who faced his final battle with more dignity and openness than almost anyone. Number 5. Eric Dane, The Last Act. Eric Dane was born Eric William Melvin on November 9, 1972, in San Francisco, California. He spent years working in the margins of television, small parts in Saved by the Bell, The Wonder Years, Roseanne, before landing a recurring role as Jason Dean on Charmed. None of it quite broke through. Then, in 2005, he appeared in a guest role on Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Mark Sloan, a charming plastic surgeon. The audience responded immediately. The character, nicknamed McSteamy by the female characters on the show for reasons that were evident from his first scene, became a series regular in the 3rd season. Dane played the role for 8 seasons, until 2012, and returned briefly in 2021. During that run, he appeared opposite an ensemble of some of the most talented television actors working, and more than held his own. He also starred as the lead in the TNT naval drama The Last Ship from 2014 to 2018, and later played the morally complex Cal Jacobs in HBO's Euphoria, where he continued demonstrating the kind of layered, unsettling work that his early career had not quite prepared audiences to expect from him. In April 2025, Dane publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, a progressive neurological disease that attacks the nerve cells controlling muscle movement. He said his symptoms had begun approximately 18 months earlier. By June 2025, he could no longer use his right arm. By October 2025, he was using a wheelchair. He continued to work. He was filming Countdown, an Amazon Prime crime series, and had already completed Bad Boys, Ride or Die. He was also working on a memoir, Book of Days, to be published after his death. He described it as an effort to capture the moments that had shaped him, the beautiful days, the hard ones, the ones he had never taken for granted, in the hope that sharing them would help someone else find meaning in their own. He became an advocate for ALS research and awareness, using what public platform he still had to push the conversation forward. He was 53 years old. On February 19, 2026, Eric Dane died of respiratory failure related to ALS. His family confirmed his passing the following day, describing him as someone who had spent his final days surrounded by dear friends, his wife, and his 2 daughters. They wrote that he had become a passionate advocate, determined to make a difference for others facing the same fight. He would have been 54 in November. Next is a civil rights rights icon who ran for president twice, and whose story ends with nearly 5 decades of fighting, long after his body had begun to make the fight harder. Number 4. Peabo Bryson, the voice that made the world fall in love. Robert Peabo Bryson was born on April 13, 1951, in Greenville, South Carolina. His mother was named Marie, and his love for music began with her. By the age of 14, he was singing backup for a local band. He left home to tour the Chitlin Circuit, the network of performance venues across the South that provided black entertainers an audience before desegregation opened other doors, with a band called Moses Dillard and the Textown Display. It was during a recording session that a label executive heard him sing and signed him, not the band. He released his debut album in 1976 and signed with Capitol Records the following year. His voice was a full, warm, luminous tenor, perfectly suited for the slow burn of a romance that had not yet admitted itself. His solo hits across the late 1970s and 1980s built a loyal following in the R&B world and the adult contemporary charts, but it was his duet work that brought him to the broadest possible audience. He paired with Roberta Flack for Tonight, I Celebrate My Love in 1983. Then came the Disney era. In 1992, he recorded Beauty and the Beast with Celine Dion, and the following year, A Whole New World with Regina Belle for Aladdin. Both songs won Grammy Awards for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal, back-to-back, in 1993 and 1994, and introduced his voice to every child who watched those films. In 2019, Bryson suffered a heart attack. He recovered and continued performing. On May 28, 2026, a representative confirmed that he had suffered a stroke. On June 2, 2026, Peabo Bryson died peacefully in Marietta, Georgia, surrounded by his family. He was 75. His duet partner, Regina Belle, described him in a statement as someone who was like a brother to her, and said that a part of him would continue to live through the music they had made together. The next person on this list built an empire with his ear for talent, but the talent he is remembered for most was recognizing voices like Peabo Bryson's before the rest of the world caught up. Number 3. James Van Der Beek. He met his final days with courage. James David Van Der Beek was born on March 8, 1977, in Cheshire, Connecticut. His father played minor league baseball. His mother was a Broadway dancer. He discovered acting in his teens after a concussion prevented him from playing sports for a season, and within a few years, he had found an agent and begun auditioning professionally. At 20, after years of theater and small parts, he was cast as Dawson Leary, the central character of a new television drama called Dawson's Creek, set in a small coastal Massachusetts town and following a group of hyper-articulate teenagers through the complications of growing up. The show premiered on the WB in January 1998 and became a cultural phenomenon. It ran for 6 seasons, ending in 2003. It made household names of Van Der Beek, Katie Holmes, Joshua Jackson, and Michelle Williams, and its frank treatment of adolescent sexuality, identity, and aspiration spoke to a generation in a way that felt distinctly genuine. For audiences who were teenagers in the late 1990s, Dawson was not just a character, he was a weekly companion, someone they watched discover what he was and wasn't capable of. After the show ended, Van Der Beek worked steadily in films like Varsity Blues, in self-referential television comedies like Don't Trust the Bee and Apartment 23, in crime series and reality programming. He competed on Dancing with the Stars. He built a life with his wife Kimberly, with whom he had 6 children, and moved the family to Texas. He was, by most accounts, a deeply devoted father and a man who had found a way to inhabit fame with unusual groundedness. In 2023, he underwent a colonoscopy after noticing changes he couldn't fully explain. The results showed stage 3 colorectal cancer. He had no family history of the disease. He described himself as someone who had always associated cancer with age and with unhealthy lifestyles, someone in good cardiovascular shape who ate carefully and assumed he was protected. He was 46. He disclosed his diagnosis publicly in November 2024, using the moment to urge his audience to get screened. He described a set of initial symptoms so subtle, changes in bowel habits, a feeling of something being slightly off, that most people would have dismissed them. He had not dismissed them, and it had made the difference between stage 3 and something worse. He wanted others to take that lesson. He raised money by auctioning memorabilia from Dawson's Creek and Varsity Blues. He appeared in a video at a Dawson's Creek reunion charity event in September 2025, unable to attend in person, but reaching the audience from a projected screen, calling them the best fans in the world. In December 2025, he appeared on The Today Show, describing himself as fortunate in an unfortunate situation. On February 11, 2026, James Van Der Beek died at home. His wife Kimberly announced his passing on Instagram. He was 48 years old. He met his final days, she wrote, with courage, faith, and grace. He left 6 children, a wife, and a generation of people who had grown up watching him and could not quite believe he was gone. Next is someone whose presence cannot be described without also describing an entire era of American action cinema. A man who, just 9 days before his death, posted a video of himself training and wrote that he didn't age, he leveled up. Number 2, Demond Wilson, Sanford and Son, and the Life That Followed. Demond Wilson was born on October 13th, 1946, in Valdosta, Georgia. As a child, he moved north to New York City, where he served in the United States Army, including a tour in Vietnam, before finding his footing in acting. His early career included stage work and television appearances, and in 1972, he was cast as Lamont Sanford, the son on the NBC sitcom Sanford and Son, alongside the comedy legend Red Fox, who played his father Fred. The show was an adaptation of the British comedy Steptoe and Son, transplanted to a predominantly black neighborhood of Los Angeles and brought to life by 2 performers whose comedic chemistry was almost unreasonably good. It ran from 1972 to 1977, becoming one of the most watched shows on American television. Lamont was the straight man with a conscience, the one trying to improve his situation, constantly undermined by his father's schemes and manipulations. And Wilson brought a warmth and naturalness to the role that made the character as beloved as any in 1970s television. After the show ended, Wilson stepped back significantly from the entertainment industry. He became an ordained minister and largely withdrew from public life, devoting his later years to his faith and family. He remarried and settled in Palm Springs, California, where he spent his final decades. On January 30th, 2026, Demond Wilson died in Palm Springs at the age of 79. The cause of death was not publicly disclosed by his family. The entertainment world paused to remember the man who had spent 5 years making Friday nights something to look forward to. The final legend on this list was a man whose career began before most people watching this video were born, and whose voice remained one of the most recognized sounds in American popular music for more than 60 years. Number 1. Bob Weir, The Grateful Dead and the Music That Never Stopped. Robert Hall Weir was born on October 16, 1947, in San Francisco, California. He was adopted as an infant and raised in Atherton, a suburb south of the city. At 15, he met Jerry Garcia at a music shop where Garcia was giving banjo lessons. The two connected over their shared obsession with American roots music, and within a couple of years, they were at the center of a loose collective of musicians that would evolve into one of the most influential bands in the history of American music. The Grateful Dead formed in 1965 in San Francisco and spent the next 3 decades becoming something that defied ordinary description. Their concerts, which could stretch past 3 or 4 hours, built around improvised jams that took familiar songs into territory no rehearsal could have anticipated, were events unlike anything else in popular music. Their audience, the Deadheads, followed them from city to city. The band played over 2,300 concerts across their career. They were not defined by chart positions or album cycles. They were defined by the experience of being in the room. Weir was the band's rhythm guitarist and one of its principal vocalists, handling songs that drew on cowboy mythology, rural Americana, and a kind of cosmic wandering that suited the band's ethos perfectly. Songs like Truckin', Sugar Magnolia, Cassidy, and One More Saturday Night became fixtures not just of Dead concerts, but of a broader American counterculture that the band had helped create and continued to sustain. After Garcia died in 1995, the remaining members pursued various configurations and projects. Weir was relentless. He founded bands and continued touring, Rat Dog, Dead & Company with John Mayer, Bobby and Wolf Brothers, refusing to stop playing. In his 70s, he was still on the road, still improvising. In the summer of 2025, he was diagnosed with cancer. He beat it. His family's statement made that clear. He had courageously beaten cancer as only Bobby could, but he succumbed to underlying lung issues. On January 10th, 2026, Bob Weir died. He was 78 years old. A memorial celebration held in his honor at San Francisco's Civic Center Plaza on January 17th drew thousands. John Mayer, Joan Baez, and Mickey Hart were among those who spoke. Garcia had gone in 1995. Weir had carried the torch for 30 years. He had played thousands of concerts, and in each one the music had been different, because that was the point. No two nights were the same. No version of a song was the final version. There was always the next show. Until January 10th, 2026. And then there wasn't.